I was grabbing dinner with a former classmate last week.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, a guy who has spent the last decade, climbing the ladder at a pretty high-profile Western think tank.
Okay, I think I can picture the type.
You can. He spent most of the meal lecturing me on why industrial policy is a relic.
A relic.
A relic of the past, and why the service-driven, financialized economy is the only sustainable path for, a modern civilization.
Very confident about that, I'm sure.
Oh, incredibly smug. He's leaning back in his chair, gesturing at this high-end bistro around us, and arguing that the East was, in his words, trapped in a manufacturing cycle they'd never escape.
A factory floor trap.
That's the one. But then the conversation took a sharp turn. I happened to mention the latest export figures from the Beijing-Tianjin-Hebei region.
The JJJ cluster.
Specifically that record-breaking 1.32 trillion yuan surge in 2025.
And let me guess, he wasn't impressed.
Didn't even look at the numbers. He just waved his hand, dismissing it as empty growth and state-subsidized bloat. Then he starts going on about how true innovation only happens in a system where people are free to disrupt the status quo, as if, the ability to manufacture the world's most advanced equipment was just some side effect of cheap labor.
It's an almost willful blindness to the tangible.
Well, the irony hit about 10 minutes later. As we're walking out of the restaurant, we had to navigate around this massive, rusted-out section of the sidewalk.
Oh.
It had been cordoned off with yellow tape for months because the local council couldn't agree on a repair contract.
You can't make this stuff up.
And he immediately starts fuming, complaining about the total incompetence of the city, the third world infrastructure he had to deal with every day. He was genuinely angry, almost spitting his words out.
But he couldn't see the connection.
Not at all. He was championing a financialized paradise while standing in the physical evidence of its literal decay.
That's a powerful image.
That instantaneous shift from praising the abstract superiority of his system to this furious condemnation of its physical reality, it was startling.
It's a total cognitive dissonance.
It made me realize that his belief wasn't based on economic data or the tangible state of the world. It was a form of intellectual nostalgia.
Yeah.
It left me wondering, while one side of the world is busy debating values over a broken sidewalk, the other has just integrated an entire industrial cluster into a 1.3 trillion yuan export engine.
And the question is, which one is actually living in the future?
Exactly. That moment, standing right there next to the physical evidence of decay while he's arguing for the abstract superiority of a system, it perfectly frames our deep dive today.
Right.
We are going to compare these two competing civilizational paths. The financialized, service-driven economy that defines so much of the West, and this industrially integrated, technocratically planned model that seems to be defining the future of East Asia.
And I think our mission here has to be moving beyond the philosophy.
Completely. We need to focus entirely on the measurable outputs and the tangible consequences of each system.
We're unpacking the structural and, frankly, what looks like an irreversible shift in global economic gravity.
Yeah, and what's really interesting here is if you strip away all the political rhetoric.
It's not about ideology.
No, the conflict we are analyzing isn't philosophical, it's profoundly physical. It's about who can still build things.
Who can maintain their infrastructure.
And how efficiently societies can organize their capital and their talent for the long haul.
And we have the data. We can actually compare a paradigm built on abstract financial gains against one built on tangible, physical, embodied modernity.
Okay, let's unpack this by starting with the massive engine driving the shift, Jingjinji, or JJJ.
Right.
Now, Beijing and Tianjin are globally known cities, but I think the critical story here is the coordinated development strategy that links them with Hebei province into a single, cohesive economic zone.
And we have to begin by just establishing the sheer scale of this thing. JJJ is the Jingjinji urban agglomeration, and it spans 217,156 square kilometers.
Which is a number so big, it's almost meaningless. How can you help us visualize that?
Okay, think of it as roughly twice the physical size of South Korea.
Twice the size of South Korea.
Is the core of North China. And the population, we're talking over 110 million people.
Wow.
That's a number comparable to the entire population of countries like the Philippines or Egypt.
So this is not just three big cities next to each other.
No, absolutely not. This is an integrated, deliberate super region. It's the result of state capacity applied directly to metropolitan planning on a scale that's hard to comprehend.
And the economic output, I assume, is proportional to that physical scale. It's not just a national center anymore. It's a global power in its own right.
It really is. The region's 2024 GDP hit 11.54 trillion yuan.
Which translates to?
That's a very substantial 1.62 trillion US dollars. If you were to treat JJJ as its own country, it would rank alongside nations like Spain in terms of total economic output.
That's incredible.
And what truly indicates the success of this integration is the trajectory. Just look at the numbers. The combined GDP in 2023 was 10.4 trillion yuan. That marks a 1.9 times increase from the 2013 figure.
So it's nearly doubled in a decade.
In a decade. That level of rapid scaling and coordination requires a governmental and planning structure that is capable of sustaining hypergrowth over a full 10-year period.
And that growth trajectory, it leads us directly to the metric that so shocked my former classmate, and really the core evidence for our discussion, that 2025 export surge.
Yes.
So what exactly is being exported here, and what does that 1.32 trillion yuan figure actually represent?
That figure, JJJ exports surpassing 1.32 trillion yuan in 2025, is the purest physical manifestation of state capacity and, you could say, civilizational vitality.
So it's the tangible response to the argument that industrial policy is a relic.
It's the ultimate rebuttal. And this isn't raw commodities we're talking about. This is high-value goods, advanced equipment, precision machinery, high-tech components, complex consumer electronics.
So this isn't just about volume, it's about sophistication.
Absolutely. This export volume validates that this region has the technical depth and the supply chain cohesion to compete at the most sophisticated level globally. It is, you could say, the hard currency of the 21st century economy.
My classmate, of course, he immediately dismissed all this as state-subsidized bloat. But the data seems to suggest this growth is now self-sustaining, right? That it's driven heavily by private dynamism.
That dismissal, it just reflects a very outdated view. The private sector is the essential measure of endogenous vitality within this massive cluster.
And what are we seeing there?
We saw a very significant 16.1% surge in private enterprise exports within JJJ. It breached 600 billion yuan.
16%.
That growth rate tells you the system has matured beyond relying solely on state-owned enterprises. The state planning successfully laid the rails, but now independent, agile private businesses are driving the train.
And what are they doing?
They're specializing in niche, high-value global supply chains. This is what transforms an area from a mere manufacturing base into a full-spectrum industrial organism.
And the ultimate expression of this long-term coordinated vision has to be Xiangyang.
Without a doubt.
It's often touted as China's city of the future, but that sounds almost, I don't know, futuristic and abstract. Can you help us define the real scope and the timeline of this project?
Right. So Xiong'an New Area, established back in 2017, is explicitly labeled a Millennium Plan.
A Millennium Plan, that's a bold title.
And that term isn't hyperbole. It signifies that the planning horizons deliberately exceed standard political cycles. This is a national-scale undertaking covering 1,770 square kilometers.
That's
Massive in scope. It's planned to last until 2035 with a strategic vision extending all the way out to 2050.
And the city isn't just about growth, right? It's about a specific kind of growth.
Exactly. It's aiming for a specific outcome to be a leading edge in innovative intelligence, green ecology, and high-quality well-being.
And what is its specific strategic purpose in the context of the larger Beijing-centered JJJ cluster? Why build it there?
Its core function is strategic decentralization. It acts as one of the two wings of the capital, complementing the main administrative center.
So it's about taking the pressure off Beijing.
The primary mission is to relieve Beijing of its immense burden of non-capital functions, everything that contributes to what they call big city disease.
So crippling congestion, pollution,
administrative overload, all of it. And this effort requires directed, massive-scale relocation. We've already seen 4 major universities, including Beijing Jiaotong University, commit to building new campuses there.
Wow.
And even more tellingly, over 200 subsidiaries and branches of central government state-owned enterprises have set up their headquarters or major branches in Xiong'an.
So this is institutional migration, not just urban sprawl.
That's the perfect way to put it.
That scale of coordination moving hundreds of state enterprises and multiple major universities, that must require an unprecedented level of planning rigidity and scope. How is this long-term vision translated into an actionable, detailed blueprint?
This is where the technocratic capacity is most evident. It's through what they call the 1+4+26 system.
Okay, break that down for us.
It's not just a blueprint, it's a comprehensive governing mechanism. The 1 is the single master guideline. That's the high-level vision document that defines the overarching goals all the way out to 2050.
And the 4?
The 4 are the 4 regional and sectorial overall plans. So things like spatial design, industrial layout, governance of the critical Bayang Lake ecological system, and general infrastructure connectivity.
And then the 26 must be the really granular stuff.
That's where it gets incredibly detailed. The 26 are the highly specialized detailed plans. These cover everything from integrated multimodal transportation networks, the specifics of energy supply and grid integration, detailed flood prevention protocols,
Disaster response planning, even the micro-design of public spaces.
everything. So it's a nested hierarchy of planning, ensuring no single element works against the others.
It's designed to prevent conflict.
Exactly. We know that over 1,000 experts, 200 specialized teams, and 2,500 engineers were involved in just formulating this structure. This systematic, layered, and rigorous approach is designed to prevent the internal political conflicts, the interagency squabbles, and the zoning battles that plague mega projects everywhere else.
It ensures every pipe, every fiber optic cable, every zoning decision works in unison toward that 2050 goal.
That's the idea.
So let's bring this conversation back to the opening anecdote. That broken sidewalk that symbolizes procedural gridlock and decay.
Right.
How does the technocratic planning of Shimon contrast with that? I mean, what are the metrics of construction speed and infrastructure momentum?
The contrast in execution capability it's the story of two civilizations, really. While a Western city is unable to agree on a contract to fix a rusted sidewalk for months, Xi'an demonstrates this relentless, almost shocking speed.
Give me an example.
Okay, consider the Xi'an Citizen Service Center. It's a 99,600 square meter public complex.
So a huge building.
Huge. And is completed and operational in just 112 days.
112 days.
That time frame is considered an absolute impossibility for a comparable public sector project in many democratically gridlocked nations.
And that speed isn't just a point of pride, is it? It's an economic competitive advantage.
It is, a massive one. In transportation, they didn't wait a decade for environmental impact studies and bureaucratic sign-offs. The intercity rail connecting Beijing Daxing International Airport and Xiang'an was operational by 2019-2020.
So very quickly after the plan was announced.
And their long-term plan is not incremental, it's transformational. They want to create a 1 to 1.5 hour traffic circle linking these world-class city clusters, supported by 24 intercity railways planned before 2050.
24 of them.
The infrastructure momentum in JJJ is tangible proof of their state capacity. It's built on steel and concrete, not credit default swaps.
I have to interject here, though, and ask a challenging question.
Go for it.
Doesn't this relentless speed, this top-down efficiency, inherently sacrifice adaptability? I mean, if the plan is set in stone until 2050, what happens when new technologies, say radically different energy storage or transport, make their current plans obsolete in 5 years?
That's a valid, critical point, and it's one the sources address by emphasizing integration with a digital twin, which we'll definitely cover shortly.
Okay.
But the core argument for this model is that achieving foundational infrastructure, now the power grid, the rail lines, the major water systems, provides a robust platform that is easier to upgrade than a decaying patchwork system.
So get the hard stuff done first.
Their long-term planning treats the foundation, the atoms, you could say, as fixed, while the services running on top of it, the bits, are designed to be fluid and digitally managed. They prioritize momentum over procedural flexibility, believing that the speed of execution outweighs the risk of future obsolescence.
That concept of momentum leads us directly to this idea of policy implementation as a generational relay race.
Yes.
Which I find incredibly powerful as a counterpoint to the short-termism we see so often in the West.
This concept, Daijijili, or generational relay, it captures the essence of East Asian planning. It implies that policy is not about a political party's 4-year term. It's a cumulative societal effort.
And the story of Mr. Zhao, the veteran urban planner, illustrates this perfectly.
It does. For 30 years, his visions of regional integration were considered esoteric ideas, just maps filed away in bureaucratic offices.
His maps of regional integration were just theoretical sketches.
Exactly. They were fantasies during his professional life. But then, by 2025, his own granddaughter started her career at the newly constructed operational Xi'an and automated logistics hub.
Wow.
What was an abstract policy for him became the physical reality and the career foundation for the next generation. That continuity is the competitive advantage.
Meanwhile, Mr. Zhao's Western counterpart might spend those same 30 years just waiting for zoning approval.
Or seeing a project get approved and then scrapped by the next mayor who comes into office.
So the high-speed rail lines and the integrated industrial zones, they aren't just technical infrastructure. They're like the central nervous system of a singular, massive industrial organism that doesn't stop breathing when a leader or a political party changes.
That is the fundamental structural difference. The strategic integration of the Jingjinji region serves as a definitive case study on how East Asian state capacity and technocratic long-term planning fundamentally outperform Western democratic gridlock in maintaining industrial competitiveness and infrastructure resilience.
That's that phrase you hear a lot.
A decade of debate, a century of delay.
Right. While the East treats a 20-year plan with the urgency of a 24-hour deadline, the ability to actually finish what you start and to build that success into the foundation of the next generation's economy.
That is arguably the most valuable capability in global competition today.
This contrast forces us to look hard at the system my smug classmate was championing, the financialized West, and ask what measurable output we are producing that is tangible beyond abstract stock valuations and derivative contracts.
And we have to start with a precise definition of financialization.
Okay, what is it?
At its core, financialization is the increasing role of financial motives, markets, and institutions in the operation of domestic and international economies. But the key difference is the pivot in profit accumulation.
How so?
It shifts decisively away from producing physical goods and services, the traditional real economy, and toward generating wealth purely through financial means.
So interests, dividends, fees.
Capital gains, exactly. It is the maximization of profit through financial engineering rather than production engineering.
And this shift wasn't some kind of natural evolution, right? It was rooted in decades of deliberate regulatory and structural changes.
Oh, absolutely.
What were the key historical turning points that locked the Western economy into this trajectory?
The structural shift really began in the late 1960s and 1970s. We observed a deep decline in manufacturing profit rates, a staggering 41% fall in U.S. manufacturing profitability between 1965 and 1973.
41%, that's a huge drop.
It is. And facing lower returns on physical investment, firms began shifting their capital allocation away from expanding plant capacity in R&D and towards financial assets where they could seek faster, higher returns.
And the banks were part of this?
Simultaneously, banks innovated. They created things like Eurodollar accounts and one-bank holding companies to legally circumvent mid-century regulations like Glass-Steagall, allowing them to enter riskier, more lucrative, non-banking lines of business.
And then came the massive policy shock of the Volcker coup in 1979. We need to go into detail about how that one monetary policy decision specifically impacted the industrial base.
Right. The decision by Federal Reserve Chair Paul Volcker to embrace tight monetary policy and drastically hike interest rates. It was designed to crush inflation, but its side effects fundamentally restructured the American economy.
Wow.
The resulting dramatic appreciation of the dollar made U.S. manufactured goods prohibitively expensive abroad. It just crushed their export competitiveness.
And at home.
Domestically, the high interest rates severely punished capital-intensive industries like auto manufacturing, steel, and heavy equipment.
And what was the immediate social and political consequence of that?
It was inherently anti-labor. The high rates induced massive recessions in 81 and 83, leading to widespread industrial downsizing and rapid offshoring of production.
Which would have weakened the unions.
It systematically eroded union density, which was historically highest in manufacturing. As production capacity dwindled, the capital share of the economy naturally increased, disproportionately favoring the nascent, deregulated finance sector.
And this paved the way for the Washington Consensus era of the 80s and 90s, where deregulation was king.
Correct. The focus during the Reagan administration and the decades that followed was the intentional dismantling of institutions and regulations that were perceived to inhibit capital mobility.
And where did the money go?
The low returns on capital stock within the physical economy discouraged any long-term placement of funds in new industrial plants or equipment. So money increasingly flowed into financial speculation and rent-seeking activities.
And this is when the shareholder value cult really takes hold.
This era cemented its rise. It legally and culturally shifted corporate power away from broader stakeholders like workers and communities, and strictly toward maximizing shareholder returns, prioritizing short-run payoffs above all else.
And the final nail in the coffin.
was the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act in 1999. It unleashed the merger of commercial and investment banks, creating massive financial conglomerates and exponentially increasing systemic risk and the appetite for financial profits.
And the combination of all these decades of policy and regulatory shifts is the financial sector of the mid-2000s, right before the 2008 crisis.
The figures just speak for themselves. By the mid-2000s, financial profits accounted for a little over 40% of total U.S. business profits.
40%.
And crucially, that figure is nearly double the average profit share the financial sector held in the post-World War II industrial period. This just demonstrates the fundamental economic gravity shift. The economy was optimized for maximizing financial accumulation, not industrial production.
That 40% profit figure in finance is staggering, especially when we compare it to the current size and employment metrics of manufacturing. How severe is that imbalance?
It creates a severe disequilibrium. Consider the historical peak. Manufacturing accounted for 40% of all profits and 29% of the nation's total jobs.
Okay, big chunk of both.
Now contrast that with today. The FIRE sector, finance, insurance, and real estate, captures that equivalent 40% of profits, but only employs about 5% of the workforce.
5%.
Is the core definition of phantom wealth, a massive accumulation of capital without commensurate job creation or broad societal benefit. The growth of FIRE saw its share of GDP more than double, from 10% in 1950 to 22% by 2020.
And this imbalance, it ties directly back to that issue of short-termism you mentioned. Companies aren't just not investing, they're actively dedicating their earnings to financial self-manipulation.
Precisely. The core mechanism of industrial disinvestment is this obsessive dedication to stock buybacks and dividends, the key mechanisms of the shareholder value cult.
And what does the data show?
Data spanning from 2003 to 2012 shows that S&P 500 companies used a devastating 91% of their net earnings for these two purposes.
91%.
54% for buybacks and 37% for dividends.
So that leaves less than 10% for the future of the company. What specific opportunities, what critical R&D projects were demonstrably foregone because all that capital was diverted into boosting short-term share prices?
That capital was explicitly diverted away from long-term capital expenditure and critical R&D. I mean, think of the immense opportunities missed in emerging fields. Advanced materials science, which is crucial for next-generation manufacturing. The early stages of green energy infrastructure build-out, or deep foundational research into AI hardware and chip fabrication capacity.
While competitors in the East were pouring money into those things.
While competitors in the East were channeling immense capital into multi-decade, state-backed R&D programs, Western corporations were primarily optimizing their balance sheets for the next quarterly report. They were sacrificing future industrial competitiveness for immediate financial extraction.
And we see the effect even in firms that were once paragons of industrial production.
Look at the once industrial giants. They now act like financial holding companies with manufacturing subsidiaries.
Like GE.
General Electric, the symbol of American engineering, was deriving 42% of its revenue from GE Capital by 2008. Even General Motors, the flagship of the Rust Belt, now derives approximately 1/3 of its pre-tax profit from financing car sales and leases. It effectively diverts resources and management attention away from the complex engineering challenges of actually manufacturing the vehicle itself.
They've become financial entities that just happen to make things.
Rather than manufacturing entities supported by finance.
Exactly.
And this connects back to that concept of intellectual decay, the loss of the Zeide, or the vehicle for talent.
This is perhaps the most existential consequence. When you abandon the physical manufacturing base, you abandon the foundational structure, the Zeide required to house and grow engineering and technical talent at scale.
If you're not making things, you forget how.
If the complex production and supply chain troubleshooting are happening offshore, the complex problem-solving happens offshore. This leads to what sources describe as collective de-intellectualization.
We lose the knowledge of how to make things at scale.
Yes. The true hard currency of the modern age is not currency itself, but tangible output. Advanced equipment, precision tools, high-tech components. When a nation's GDP is dominated by speculative finance, it generates that phantom wealth.
It exists on hollow prestige, while its physical mastery atrophies. It's the direct cause of the broken sidewalk syndrome.
This loss of technical mastery and the resulting intellectual vacuum, it's perfectly illustrated by the story of Lin, the Tianjin engineer.
Yes.
He made a deliberate choice about what kind of economy he wanted to inhabit.
Lin's choice is a profound comment on the two systems. He was a precision tooling engineer who, after a 3-year stint at a major financial firm in London, returned to the JJJ region.
And why did he go back?
His core reason for leaving the West was what he termed the spiritual hollowness of financial work. He watched the brightest minds in London dedicating themselves to complex digital arbitrage and financial modeling to create that phantom wealth.
While the physical industrial base that underpinned society was neglected and decaying.
Exactly. He returned because he wanted to work with atoms, not just bits.
Atoms, not just bits. That's a powerful phrase.
It's a civilizational manifesto. He viewed working in high-tech manufacturing, physically building sophisticated tools, as a necessary form of civilizational preservation, a countermeasure against the systematic de-skilling he witnessed abroad.
So his perspective argues that the so-called post-industrial phase is not a peak of evolution,
but a form of structural decay. The 1.32 trillion yuan export figures we discussed earlier are not just digits on a screen. They represent the collective, continuously sharpened intelligence of millions of engineers and technicians who still possess the essential engineering culture.
And this culture supports long-term survival and resilience.
Right. Financialization might offer superior short-term returns, but maintaining the ability to physically manifest sophisticated ideas provides long-term tangible power.
So if the West is dedicated to the digital and the abstract, and the East is dedicated to the physical and the tangible, the result is that physical reality embodied by my classmates' anger at the Brecon sidewalk.
Exactly.
That physical decay is the price of the abstract financial paradise.
It is the ultimate measure of divergence. The system optimized for short-term financial abstraction forgets the physical infrastructure that houses it. The system optimized for long-term industrial output prioritizes maintaining that infrastructure as a matter of economic and civilizational security.
We must also address the measurable social cost of financialization. I mean, beyond the physical decay and the loss of industrial capacity, the data shows that this shift has severely exacerbated income inequality within the West.
The econometric data is very clear on this. It links the rise of the financial sector directly to rising social friction. Income inequality in the U.S., measured by the Gini coefficient for household pre-tax, pre-transfer income, has risen steadily since 1967.
And when did it really take off?
It accelerated sharply in the early 1980s, precisely when financial deregulation took hold.
So what were the specific drivers that econometric models pinpointed?
Well, while researchers acknowledge the influence of factors like union decline and increasing import competition, the models demonstrated that the increase in inequality derived most clearly from two factors.
Which were?
First, worsening economic conditions, like high cyclical unemployment. And second, the reduction in the minimum wage relative to national productivity. But crucially, the growth of the FIRE sector was confirmed to be statistically significant in exacerbating this inequality.
Okay, help us understand the mechanism there. How does the growth of a small, highly profitable sector actively widen the income gap across the entire society?
It really comes down to wealth extraction and rent seeking. In a traditional industrial economy, a large percentage of revenue has to be continuously reinvested in production, labor, and R&D. It flows through a wide channel.
Right.
In the FIRE sector, profits are often generated through highly leveraged activities, derivatives trading, and fee structures mechanisms that rely less on widespread labor and more on concentrated intellectual capital and access to large pools of money.
So it shifts the balance of power.
Fundamentally, it alters the balance of power toward rentiers, the owners of financial assets and capital.
So the rentiers capture an ever larger share of the national wealth.
Exactly. Financialization empowered these rentier interests, the large asset managers, financial institutions, wealthy investors, to capture an increasing share of national income. The inflation-adjusted rentier share of gross national income rose dramatically, from an average of about 7% before 1975 to well over 20% during the 1980s and 1990s.
That's a huge jump.
This concentration of profits in the financial sector acts as an engine of inequality, channeling wealth away from the wages of the producing class and toward the speculative gains of the owning class.
We've established the social and physical costs of the financialized path. Now let's pivot back to the integrated model of JJJ, specifically focusing on the advanced technocratic planning that stands in such stark contrast to the West's preference for procedural liberalism and debate.
And the foundation of modern technocratic governance is not just physical, it is digital. Xiang'an's planning goes far beyond simple infrastructure. They are simultaneously building a digital twin city.
A digital twin, what does that mean practically? It sounds like science fiction. What kind of infrastructure is required to run a city with a full digital twin?
It demands total systems integration. This requires next-generation infrastructure, including citywide intelligent sensing systems, or IoT.
So everything is measured and communicating in real time.
Everything. Plus, widespread 5G and fiber networks, massive urban cloud and big data platforms, and AI-driven city brains that manage traffic, utilities, and emergency services. Because they started from scratch, they are not retrofitting. They are defining the future.
And the regulatory framework for this kind of system had to be created from nothing.
Precisely. They recognize that, and I'm quoting here, there is no precedent anywhere in the world that can serve as a model. So Zhang had to write the rulebook itself.
They just created their own standards.
They officially published the first edition of its standards regime for intelligent city construction back in May 2020. This comprehensive standardization ensures that every piece of physical infrastructure, from the utility pipelines to the public transit scheduling, is perfectly interoperable with the digital layer.
Which enables that high efficiency and centralized management.
Capabilities that existing major cities burdened by legacy systems simply cannot achieve.
This sounds intensely focused on efficiency, but how does this hyper-planned system incorporate human-centric needs? I mean, is it truly livable?
The planning explicitly reflects people-centric concepts, which is crucial for long-term sustainability. A key feature is the design of 15-minute living zones in the initial construction areas.
The 15-minute city concept.
Right. These zones have a defined service radius of about 1 kilometer, designed to serve roughly 50,000 residents. The goal is accessibility, ensuring every resident is within a short walk or bike ride of essential services.
Like public transport, schools, health centers.
Markets, cultural centers, everything. This dramatically reduces commuting time and reliance on individual vehicles.
And that focus on integrated design also extends to environmental goals, which are often the first casualty of short-term industrial planning in the West.
The environmental commitments are mandatory and embedded right within that 1+4+26 framework. The plan mandates achieving more than 70% blue and green spaces by 2035 and aims for 40% forest coverage across the new area.
And are they hitting those targets?
The Kieni and Julin, the Millennium Forest Afforestation Project, is already showing results. It increased coverage from 11% to 22.7% by 2019.
That's a huge increase in a short time.
Furthermore, through rigorous control and ecological remediation, the water quality in the critical Bayang Lake Central area has improved significantly, moving from below Class V to Class 4, with some test areas reaching Class 3. They are demonstrating that high-speed industrialization and long-term environmental sustainability are not mutually exclusive when managed technocratically.
Okay, now we come to a more nuanced and perhaps more controversial element of the JJJ success story, the role of high social trust and order.
Right.
In the West, we often view strict social order as a drag on dynamism, but here the sources suggest it's a powerful economic multiplier.
It's a massive silent multiplier. The dense, complex industrial clusters of JJJ are underpinned by high social trust and predictable order. This facilitates low-cost, high-reliability collaboration across entire supply chains.
How does that work?
Think about the costs of doing business in a system defined by the normalization of disorder. A system where systemic theft, unpredictable bureaucracy, and high litigation rates are common.
It's a tax on everything.
These factors act as an unquantified but massive tax on economic activity through increased insurance, security requirements, and high transactional costs.
So stability and predictability are the necessary foundational guarantees for industrial efficiency.
Absolutely. The perspective here is that social order and strict, predictable laws are not authoritarian repression, but the foundational guarantee for a stable, low-cost business environment. If you know the rules and you know they will be consistently enforced, you can move capital and goods with high reliability.
Which directly contrasts with the slow, high-cost environment created by excessive procedural democracy, or NM.
Or, conversely, by systems prone to instability and atomization.
And this high-trust environment is best exemplified by the story of Sophia, the logistics manager in Shijiazhuang.
Yes.
It really shows how this social structure translates into a competitive execution advantage.
Sophia was facing a major international order that required a complete design pivot for a component in just 72 hours.
72 hours.
In many systems, this would immediately trigger complex contractual disputes, delay clauses, a mountain of legal paperwork.
And the deadline would be missed.
Guaranteed. However, in the JJJ industrial cluster, she was able to accomplish this pivot through what she called a web of high social trust.
So what does that look like on the ground? How does that actually happen?
It means vendors and component manufacturers moved swiftly on what was practically a handshake agreement. They were driven by a shared, meritocratic goal of fulfilling the global order, bypassing the need for endless procedural debate and expensive, time-consuming contractual risk mitigation.
The efficiency comes from a cultural norm of shared collective interest.
And reliable execution, which is intrinsically faster and more reliable than a system that defaults to suspicion and litigation.
And this leads directly into the broader concept of the Asian values framework.
Yes.
Which is often dismissed in the West as merely a justification for political control. But what is the economic argument supporting it?
The Asian values perspective argues that prioritizing social order, meritocratic governance, so selecting leaders based on ability rather than populist appeal and collective interest over procedural liberalism, is the actual engine of this efficiency.
And what are the key components of that?
Things like emphasizing family values as the basis of society, respecting authority, including institutional authority, focusing on consensus-driven policy, and placing the collective long-term interest above the short-term individual interest.
And the economic argument.
The economic argument is that this results in a high reliability, low transaction cost engine that is structurally more efficient than systems optimized for endless adversarial debate. The record-breaking export data from the JJJ region is used to validate this perspective, arguing that it is the primary structural factor driving the irreversible shift of the global economic center of gravity toward the east.
But doesn't the system inherently create risk? I mean, if meritocracy is valued above all else and consensus is prized over open debate, how does that system self-correct when the consensus is wrong? Where is the disruptive feedback loop that Western systems, however chaotic, still possess?
That is the structural trade-off. The system sacrifices bottom-up disruption for top-down efficiency and continuity.
So how does it correct itself?
The sources don't ignore this. They frame the risk as an engineering problem to be managed technocratically, rather than a political problem to be resolved through adversarial debate. The self-correction is designed to happen through feedback loops within the expert bureaucracy, the city brains, and the vast data monitoring, rather than through public political challenge.
It's a bet on the long-term competence of a professionalized technocracy
over the chaotic dynamism of democratic churn. That's the bet.
So the structural success of the JJJ engine and the inherent weaknesses of the financialized model, this all sets the stage for intense global friction. Let's look at the global battleground as it stood in the first quarter of 2025, where these two economic philosophies collide in trade and policy.
Right. Global trade remained remarkably resilient despite all of the geopolitical uncertainty. Global trade volumes continue to expand in Q1 2025, recording a 1.5% quarter-over-quarter growth.
That's pretty strong.
It is. Projections suggested total global trade would expand by approximately $300 billion in the first half of 2025. This shows that even with political friction, the industrial supply chains, many of which are anchored in the East, continue to deliver.
But the growth was highly uneven, wasn't it? Illustrating the policy divergence we've been discussing.
Indeed. In Q1 2025, developed economies surprisingly outpaced developing ones in trade growth.
Why was that?
This wasn't necessarily a sign of new industrial vitality in the West. It was largely driven by two factors: strong, stable export activity from the European Union, and critically, a significant surge in imports by the United States.
And that U.S. import surge was not a celebration of free trade.
Not at all. It was a direct tactical response by businesses rushing to bring in high volumes of goods ahead of anticipated tariff increases.
So that scramble directly translates into widening global trade imbalances.
Correct. The structural divergence continues to widen these imbalances.
Right.
This is driven by a growing trade deficit in the United States and correspondingly rising surpluses in the integrated industrial regions, notably China and the European Union.
And the biggest imbalance is still between the U.S. and China.
The largest bilateral imbalance remains immense, running at an annual $360 billion. And critically, this deficit widened by another $5 million in just Q1 of 2025.
So that metric shows the continued and growing dependence of the consumer-driven financialized West on the tangible industrial capacity of the East.
A dependence the West is simultaneously trying to legislate against.
And the pressure points are shifting from traditional goods to policy itself. Global economic uncertainty is now being exacerbated by the rise of these inward-looking industrial policies.
Geopolitical risk has prompted a global reaction. The growth in domestic subsidies and protectionist industrial policies, think CHIP Acts, Inflation Reduction Acts, and similar measures aimed at supporting national or regional industries, is creating friction.
And this is going to weigh on international trade.
Heavily, especially in the coming years, and particularly in strategic and high-tech sectors, as countries attempt to reshore critical production capacity in response to supply chain risks.
So while the East focuses on perfecting its physical industrial output, the West, particularly the US, maintains overwhelming dominance in the digital space. And that concentrated digital market power is now the central battleground for global regulators.
The concentration is breathtaking. As of mid-2025, 7 of the world's 10 most valuable companies were US-based digital giants.
NVIDIA, Microsoft, Apple,
Amazon, Alphabet, Meta, and Broadcom. These firms command the crucial infrastructure of the global digital economy, cloud computing, AI platforms, operating systems, social media. This dominance is explicitly described as America's digital economic dominance.
But this concentration has triggered a coordinated global policy pushback from economies that worry about stifled local innovation and limited consumer choice. We need to go into detail about the EU's action here because it represents a major regulatory shift.
The European Union's Digital Markets Act, or DMA, represents the most significant countermeasure. The DMA is an example of ex-ante regulation.
Ex-ante, what does that mean?
This is key. Traditional antitrust law used in the U.S. is ex post. It reacts to market failure after anti-competitive behavior has caused harm.
So it's about breaking up a monopoly after 10 years of damage.
Right. Ex-ante regulation, like the DMA, is proactive. It establishes rules before harm occurs, specifically targeting firms deemed gatekeepers based on their size and influence, mandating certain behaviors and prohibiting others.
So it's policy designed to prevent anti-competitive structure, not just punish anti-competitive behavior.
Precisely. And we saw major actions in early 2025. Apple was fined 500 million euros for its anti-steering practices.
Which is restricting app developers from directing users to cheaper options outside the App Store.
Exactly. And Meta was fined 200 million euros over its coercive consent or pay model for privacy.
And this regulatory philosophy isn't limited to the EU.
No, countries like Australia, Brazil, India, and the UK are adopting similar ex-ante regulations. Even China's State Administration for Market Regulation, the SAMR, has acted decisively, notably fining Alibaba $2.8 billion in 2021 for abuse of dominance.
This regulatory pushback against digital market power, it really highlights the West's vulnerability. When the West critiques the East for state-subsidized bloat in manufacturing, the East and Europe are critiquing the West's own state-protected monopoly in digital services.
And this is where the policy friction reaches its peak. The U.S. government views these regulations, such as the DMA, not as legitimate competition policy, but as economic aggression.
They see it as an attack.
In February 2025, a U.S. directive was announced, essentially threatening to impose tariffs and trade restrictions in response to foreign regulations that target U.S. digital giants. Washington's stance is that these regulations are de facto trade barriers that undermine America's digital economic dominance and should prompt retaliation under trade law.
The battle lines couldn't be clearer, could they? It's a clash of priorities. The West uses trade policy to protect its financialized, high-tech digital champions,
while the East and much of the world use competition law to try and regulate that concentrated market power. It's the battle of the abstract economy versus the real economy.
We have dissected two divergent civilizational paths. On one side, you have the financialized short-term hyper-rotation of capital in the West, optimizing for quarterly returns and abstract gains,
resulting in the decay of its physical industrial base and infrastructure, the broken sidewalk.
And on the other, you have the potent, disciplined maturity of East Asia's industrial civilization, optimizing for long-term execution and physical manifestation,
resulting in the JJJ engine's 1.32 trillion yuan export surge.
The difference is structural. It is a choice between systems optimized for endless adversarial debate and systems optimized for relentless generational execution.
The technocratic long-term planning, the Jingjinji of policy, the maintenance of the Zaidi, the vehicle for technical mastery, that is the signature of embodied modernity.
If we step back and adopt the historical perspective, the dynamism shown by the JJJ region represents the expansive, constructive energy of a civilization in its potent maturity.
Conversely, the Western emphasis on protective sanctions and the furious debate over its crumbling infrastructure, and often appears less like strength and more like the psychological defense mechanisms of a culture in its twilight,
struggling to legislate against the momentum of history.
And the defining policy friction today is the West fighting to protect its concentrated financial and digital champions, while the East focuses on perfecting its physical production and supply chain cohesion.
It seems the battle for global economic leadership isn't just about GDP figures anymore. It's about who can still master the physical world.
The ultimate outcome will not be determined by financial theory or abstract market valuations. It is the victory of embodied modernity, of will made steel, policy made infrastructure, and long-term vision made manifest in the enduring power of the real economy. The center of global gravity has shifted, and its new locus is built on foundations far more solid than any financial bubble.